Welcome to AppStories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Sketch Party TV and HealthView. I'm John Voorhees, and with me as always is my co-host, Federico Vitici. Hi, Federico.
Hey, John, how's it going?
Really good, really good. Can you imagine that we are going to be in San Jose watching the WWDC keynote in just a week from now?
Yeah, it seems a little crazy to me that it's happening again and that I should get ready for a brand new version of iOS already. It feels like yesterday that I was working on my iOS 10 review, but it's happening again. So still can't believe it, but not a lot of time left now.
No, we're just getting ready to head out of town and recording a show before we leave. If you're in San Jose for WWDC this year, definitely come out and say hello if you see us around. We'll be around all week, and we actually are bringing stickers with us for App Stories. So if you're a sticker person, I know we're going to try to make Mike put one on everything he owns. We had to buy extra just for him, but we'll have some left for everybody else if you're interested.
So, John, today I wanted to bring up a topic that I wanted to discuss 2 weeks ago, but we decided to focus on subscriptions. And my idea was, while we discussed app subscriptions and how some companies and some indie developers are taking advantage of this new model to build more sustainable businesses to generate recurring revenue from users, there's also other techniques that developers are using to find ways to make money on the App Store and to make a living selling, especially iOS apps on the App Store. And now, while subscriptions and maybe in-app purchases or paid apps might as well be the future, there are still these techniques that I think are interesting to observe, both from a user perspective and also to sort of understand what developers are doing. They're interesting enough and they're different enough that I think we could bring up some examples and understand why these apps, why these developers are using these approaches. And there's a good chance that perhaps you've come across these alternative ways for apps to ask for your support, to ask for money. And the strategies that we're going to cover today are not as popular as paid apps or freemium apps with in-app purchases. They're definitely not as popular as doing subscriptions right now. But I still feel like they provide an interesting insight into how certain developers, and especially the indie ones, are trying to operate outside of the usual spectrum of paid downloads and $5 a month as a subscription. So I think we should talk about it.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it's interesting to me because I think one of the things it demonstrates on a high level is just how many different ways there are to make money on the App Store. It doesn't mean it's easy to make money on the App Store, but there are a lot of alternatives that are worth thinking about if you're selling an app. And it's interesting also from a user's standpoint, the different things you come across when you're on the App Store and looking for an app. So the first thing I thought we would talk about is patronage and fan clubs. And probably the first app that I ever ran into that experimented with patronage is David Smith's app, Pedometer Plus Plus, which has a tip jar. If you go into the settings of the app, he has a tip jar that lets you tap a button to donate $1, $2, or $5 to David to keep development going. The tip does one thing, which is remove ads, and it was the first one I came across. Do you remember any earlier ones than that, Federico?
No, I think in my mind, Parameter Plus Plus was also the first one, and I'm not sure if in the first version it also removed the ads. I seem to recall that the first version was only a way to show your support, basically getting nothing in return. But I may be getting this wrong. It was, I think, 3 years ago now at this point that the first version came out. But in my mind, at least it was the first example that was sort of more popular and more covered on maybe tech blogs, especially because David has a sort of an online presence. He used to do his show Developing Perspective. He has a very popular blog. And so I think in my mind, it was the first popular example of donations done with the format of the tip jar and in-app purchases, and the idea of you're not unlocking any special new features. You're basically showing your support to the developer and ensuring that development of the app can continue.
Right, and that's my recollection too. That the beginning, it didn't do anything. It didn't remove ads. It just was a pure tip jar. And that's one form of what we're talking about today is the pure tip jar patronage model, where you don't really get anything in addition for your tip or your patronage donation. And David was kind of a pioneer on that, I think, too. So another app that did that was Marco Arment's Overcast in version 2.0. He added a patronage model to Overcast that removed all of the limitations of earlier versions. Originally it was a paid app and you paid a premium price for things like Smart Speed
Mhm.
and Voice Boost. And then with 2.0, I think Marco's thought was to try to spread the app to a broader user base and also not cripple the functionality of the app for people who weren't willing to pay the premium price, so that everybody enjoyed the same features, but they could, if they wanted, provide a donation through the settings of the app. And he's removed that since then. In the latest version, he's gone back to a premium type of model, but at this time it's a subscription. And for $9.99 a year, you can remove ads, which is what he's doing these days.
Yeah, it's Marco has since moved back to Overcast Premium. It's called. It's basically $10 a year to remove the ads and unlock features such as the file uploads and the custom icon. But when Overcast 2.0 launched, and I remember this because I worked on a story and I interviewed Marco at the time, and the effect of the patronage model, such a high profile app from a high profile developer, it made an impact in the developer community. And I remember a lot of developers sort of starting this discussion of, can we try this patronage model ourselves? Can we follow the example of Overcast 2.0? And of course, in hindsight, I don't know if it was a good idea necessarily, especially, because I think Overcast 2.0 was different from most of the niche indie apps with a smaller audience. And this is one of the downsides of donations that we're going to talk about in a bit. But the model didn't necessarily scale to other types of apps and other types of developers. But it definitely started this discussion. And I remember, for example, that Castro, which is another podcast player for iOS, very popular one, they also tried to adopt a patronage model, I think shortly after Overcast 2.0 did. And I'm not sure that it necessarily went well, because also the developers of Castro moved back to a paid upfront model. But it's this discussion of donations and becoming member supported, if you will, it's still happening today, and there's still developers who are trying to see if maybe donations from loyal users, because it's all about loyalty, and it's all about trying to find the users who love your app so much that they're willing to support you to get, even if they don't get anything in return. And there's still some apps that do this as an option. It's not necessarily the main business model, but it's definitely an option that it's done inside the app within app purchases. And an example is Twitterrific, for example. Twitterrific, the Twitter client, has a tip jar to show your support. These are one-time donations, and they go from $1 to $20. So you can just use Touch ID to make a donation in the app. And there's also a monthly option, which is interesting. It's basically a recurring donation. It's 49-cent donation done with the Twitter tip jar inside the app. And these donations, they don't unlock anything else. It's just a way to show your support for the app and to ensure that the development of this third-party Twitter client can continue in the future. There's also Drafts, which is the excellent text editor and note-taking app that we all like at AppStories and AppStories. The app has the primary business model is not the tip jar, but it's an option. So you can go into the settings and you don't get any extras. You don't unlock any specific feature. It is just a donation. It's a pure tip jar, basically. You can donate $1, $3, or $5. And it's a way, again, to show your support and to make sure that the developer, Greg, can continue working on drafts. So we mentioned Castro that tried to do donations as well. And I've tried to find other examples in my app library on iTunes and on my phone and my iPad, but I couldn't quite find a lot of them. And I think it's because this idea of the patronage model was popular a couple of years ago, but most developers have since moved back to either subscriptions or tip jars as an option. I don't see as many developers trying the patronage and trying the tip jar as their main strategy now. And maybe it's just me, so I don't know, John, if you find any apps that still do donations as the primary revenue stream.
No, I agree with you. I haven't found any either, and I think it really is on the decline. I think the problem with the pure tip jar patronage model is that it only really works if you have a very large audience, because realistically there's only going to be a small number of people that actually make the donations. So you have to have an app that has a broad-based appeal to a large audience, and then you have to have enough, super fans within that broad-based audience that'll actually pay. And I think that the
Mhm.
number of apps that can pull that off is pretty limited. Thanks to Sketch Party TV for sponsoring App Stories this week. Sketch Party TV is a fun, fast drawing and guessing game for Apple TV that's perfect for parties, family gatherings, special occasions, and impromptu game nights. This game is fantastic and a favorite at Mac Stories. It was even spotlighted by Apple during the WWDC 2016 keynote. All you need to play is an Apple TV and an iPad or an iPhone. It's a fun, fast-paced game that's a little like Pictionary. You split up into two teams, and one player is given a secret word that they have to draw on an iPad or iPhone that's displayed on the TV using the Apple TV. Teammates need to identify the drawing within 2 minutes. A game with 6 players can be played in under 30 minutes. Sketch Party TV is great for classrooms, too. With a built-in custom word list editor, teachers can use it to create word lists with ease and make building students' vocabularies fun. The game is highly customizable too. There are options for the number of words drawn per turn, the time limit for drawing them, and word lists of varying difficulty. There's even a special word list for kids. In all, there are thousands of words to draw in 7 different languages, including French, German, Spanish, even English and Italian. Critically acclaimed and enjoyed worldwide, Sketch Party TV is available on the App Store. But go check it out at sketchparty.tv/appstories, because Matt Braun of Magnet Interactive has a special limited time offer. He's giving away 5 copies of Sketch Party TV to AppStories listeners. Visit sketchparty.tv/appstories to learn more. Offer valid while supplies last. Thanks again to Sketch Party TV for its support of AppStories.
There's a slightly different approach that I think is becoming sort of popular these days, which is the donation that also unlocks some features. And I know that it is sort of a blurred line between, well, this is an in-app purchase, basically you're unlocking extra features, but I think it's all in the way that it's marketed and that it's presented to the user. Some developers have been playing around with this idea of it's an in-between of an in-app purchase and a tip jar, or maybe it's a tip jar with benefits. I don't know how we're supposed to call them, but it's basically the idea is it's marketed as a way to support the app and get some low-key, smaller extras in return. I think it's the best way to put it.
Right, and I think it is really all in the marketing, because if you don't market it right, I think what it comes across as is a defensive move that is really to mute complaints that your premium features aren't worth what you're charging for them. Which I think if it comes off that way, it's not going to work right. That's not a good message to be sending your customers. But I think a lot of apps that we're about to discuss do it right and make it clear that you're going to get a little something extra, but it's also to support ongoing development.
Right. And the first example that I think it's also very relevant because it only came out a few days ago, it's PicCalc by James Thompson. It's an excellent and powerful calculator for iOS and the Mac. And on iOS, James is very cleverly, I should say, taking advantage of a new feature in iOS 10.3, which is an option for apps to provide a custom icon and to change the app's icon on the home screen. James is taking advantage of this feature to connect it with the tip jar inside of the app. So if you want to unlock the custom icons for PicCalc, of which there are many, you can choose from standard icons, custom colored icons, which are called the true colors, and also some very awesome, I should say, they're called the totally retro icons, which include the original app icons from 2008, redrawn for the current iOS icon shape. Anyway, James is using this niche and relatively new feature, which is the custom icon, as the perk for a donation. So you can choose from 4 levels of donations in the tip jar. You can go from $1 to $2, $5, and $10. And James markets the option as we've never asked for more money since the original app came out on the App Store several years ago. This is a way to show your support for Pcalc, to ensure that if you really like the app, that we can continue working on it. But also, as you donate, you get these custom icons in return, and you can change the app's icon on the home screen. And I believe it's very clever because James knows his audience, and he knows that there are a lot of tech savvy users who are familiar with the new feature in iOS 10.3. They're curious to check out this new option. The icons are awesome, especially the 6 colors one that it's a throwback to the old Apple logo. And so is combining this donation with the small benefit of the custom icon that, however, for this type of audience, it's the kind of custom smaller feature that can entice a lot of users to make a donation. And I think it's a very clever way to monetize Peacock in a different way.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting approach to it, and his icons are really, really nice. So I think he's kind of hit this exactly the way you have to approach it, which is continue support for the app, which has been out for a very long time, and provide a cool perk.
I also have 2 other examples that I don't think, especially one of them, I don't think it's as clever or as well thought out as Peacock, but I still believe it's worth mentioning. You may be familiar with Paper, the sketching app for iPhone and iPad. They also have this patronage model, which is $6 for 6 months. And this donation started as a tip jar, basically as a pure tip jar. It's only a way to show your support for Paper and to make sure that 53, the developers, can continue making the app. But now the patronage, if you become a Paper supporter, you also get a copy and paste feature in return, which allows you to copy a selected region of a page in Paper and paste it in another section of the app. And again, it's a small feature. I'm actually kind of surprised this was not available by default. So I think I don't see the Paper donations being extremely popular, at least among the people that I follow and the developers that I talk to. I don't think that becoming a Paper supporter and member is as popular as maybe the custom icons in Peacock. And that could be because the perk, the benefit that you get, doesn't seem as cool or as exclusive as custom icons. Another app that I think does it well is Hello Weather. Hello Weather is a weather app for iPhone and iPad, and the app calls its patronage section the Fun Club, which is interesting to me. The Fun Club includes some exclusive features, and there's one that I think it is very clever as an approach. So if you become a member of the Fun Club of the app, you can unlock Weather Underground as a weather source. And especially if you live in Europe, you may be familiar with Weather Underground because the weather data and the forecasts that they provide tends to be better, at least in Italy, tends to be better than what you get from Yahoo Weather or Dark Sky, for example. You can choose to get Weather Underground as a weather provider, but you can also unlock custom icons, which is similar to what James is doing with Peacock. You can unlock a night mode, so you can switch the app to a dark mode, and also other experimental features and sort of preview what the developers are working on. And of course, it's also described as a way to support the app's development. And I know that this blurs the line between, is this really a donation or is it a standard in-app purchase? And I think this is exactly the point. These donations with benefits, maybe they are a more emotionally charged in-app purchase. I think it's very clever to say, if you love the app, you also get this in return, as opposed to say, well, it's a free app, and if you want to unlock the other features, pay up. I think it's a way to target your most loyal users and to also make them happier. And I think if developers are going with this approach in the future, we're going to see more of these marketing strategies of We know you love the app, and you can make a donation, and you also get something in return.
That's an interesting approach. And I agree with you. It does seem to kind of blur the lines because it's a free app. It's a little bit closer to a freemium model in my mind, but it is kind of in the marketing. Another thing that developers can do to cross promote similar apps or other apps that they have on the App Store is to do app bundles. This is something that came into iOS with iOS 8. And an app bundle can have up to 10 apps in it and it has to be a paid app. And the bundle itself must cost less than the sum of its parts. So if, for instance, I did this with Blink when my son Owen, who is also an iOS developer, came out with Associate, which is an Amazon affiliate linking app, it made sense to do them as a bundle. So separately, they're $4.99 each, so basically $10. Together, they're $8. And it's been fairly successful. I'd say it accounts for about 25% of our revenue. But there are some limitations with bundles. And the thing that I found personally frustrating with it is that it's very slow to get them approved. You can't actually create the bundle until all the apps are on the store. And that means that you don't have it on launch day, which is when you're getting the most attention. And in fact, I think it took us, I don't remember exactly, it took at least 10 days for the bundle to be approved. So the hype of the launch was well over by the time the bundle was actually on the store. And it was strange to me. I mean, it's one of those things that now with app review being so fast for standard apps, that seems flipped on its head because doing an app bundle, all you really have to do as a developer is give it a name. You can give it a custom icon, but you don't have to, and then give it a description. There's really nothing more to it, but then it does have to be approved by app review independently of the apps that are in the bundle. And that process, at least as of last summer, was still taking a pretty long time compared to regular app review process. So a lot of developers are using this. I think it's generally a good way to cross promote different apps that you have in the store and maybe capture some people who are discount oriented. But the developer that's doing it in a little bit different way that I think is really interesting is the Omni Group, because they've used this as a way to create an upgrade path. Because if you remember, the original OmniFocus was separated between an iPhone app and an iPad app. And eventually, I guess it was last year, Omni decided to go with a universal app, and they wanted to find a way to let their iPhone-only users come on over to the universal app and join the two. So what they did is they created a bundle that included both the universal app and the legacy iPhone-only app, and charged $20 for it. The app itself, the universal app, costs $40 on the App Store, but the bundle is $20. So that was basically an upgrade to the universal app for $20. It's a nice hack and kind of a clever way of doing upgrades when upgrades aren't a thing on the App Store. It is a little confusing though, because you're basically sending your users to a bundle to buy a bundle of the existing app and the new app. They did a video to explain it, and the biggest downside, as I see it, is that you have to keep that legacy app on the store. So you can accidentally go buy the old version of OmniFocus for $40 right now in the store. I mean, they have in big letters, in the name of the app that it's a legacy, but it's still on there, which is a little tough, but it is an option.
Yeah, and I think maybe if you need a video explanation, it's definitely not a user-friendly approach.
Right.
If you need a video to explain it, yeah, but it's possible, so it's interesting. Now, I have something completely different, and that is still not popular because I think it's a new feature, and I've only seen one example of how this option could be possible in the future, but I think it's worth discussing because I can see how this could take off. A few weeks ago, there was this story from Shopify, the e-commerce service and platform. They're launching a new SDK, which is called the Unity Buy. So if you're familiar with video games, it is not the Unity engine. It's an e-commerce solution from Shopify. Now, this may sound completely boring, the words that I just used, e-commerce and SDK, but basically the idea is Shopify will allow game developers and just app developers in general to sell their own physical items, physical merchandise inside their games and inside their apps. And one of the first developers that will support this in-app store solution is Alto's Adventure, the excellent infinite runner for iOS. So you will be able to buy physical Alto themed goods inside of the game, such as hats or mugs or t shirts. And I think it's interesting to consider how other developers could also use this sort of way to make money from loyal users. Again, we go back to the idea of targeting your fan base to sell accessories, toys, mugs, keychain, for example, those little keychain things, t-shirts, of course, little pins, stickers, even all sorts of merchandise, all sorts of accessories that your loyal users may appreciate, especially if it's a game. I think it makes a lot of sense. Again, this is a new feature from Shopify. It's a new SDK. I haven't seen other app examples, other game developers using this option yet, but I think it has a lot of potential, especially for characters from games come to mind because they usually have characters that are very relatable and that you can recognize instantly. Whereas maybe it could be a little tough, John, to sell, I don't know, a little action figure of an iTunes affiliate link, maybe.
That would be a little hard.
I don't know how you could sell it, but maybe it could be possible, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, but definitely I want to keep an eye on this because especially for iOS games, I think it has a lot of potential.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is a ton of potential there. Thanks to HealthView for sponsoring AppStories. HealthView is an iOS dashboard for health data collected by the iPhone and Apple Watch. HealthView is fully customizable with over 25 separate health stats that can be tracked, a clean, colorful design, a gorgeous dark mode, and a widget to track your favorite stats. What's more, you can set goals against which you can track your progress. HealthView also includes an Apple Watch complication and app to check your health fitness goals without pulling out your phone. Go to our show notes for a link to HealthView on the App Store. Thanks again to HealthView for supporting the show. So I think one of the lessons of our discussion today, Federico, is that you really need to know your audience to pick a pricing model. Picking a pricing model is really hard, and it's, the App Store has historically been something of a black box. That's getting a little better because we've got better analytics. I mean, we've seen announcements just a couple of weeks ago of new types of analytics that Apple is providing to developers. And I think it's important for developers to keep an eye on that sort of thing and understand their customers, because I think PCalc, again, is a good example of James understanding his user base and providing something that I think will be quite popular. Of the various models we've discussed, though, I think the pure patronage one is the one that feels the most problematic to me, and I feel like it's on the wane. It's not something, as we mentioned before, it really requires you to have a very large customer base in order to get enough people who are willing to pay you for no additional features or anything in your app to make a go of that. And while people are continuing to try it, I don't feel like I've seen nearly as many doing it as maybe a couple of years ago when Overcast 2.0 came out. Bundles too are a bit of a mixed bag. There's no doubt that they cannibalize your full price sales, but they probably also capture people who are discount oriented and want to get a good deal. So, I think they're useful. I just feel also, though, that they're a little bit of a forgotten corner of the App Store that Apple hasn't really paid a lot of attention to. And I'm not sure that consumers necessarily are drawn to them in large numbers. One of the problems that I should have mentioned before too is that when you do the complete the bundle, it just charges you if you already own one of the apps in the bundle, it just charges you the difference in the price. The problem is that it doesn't show you what you're going to be charged until late in the game. When you first see the bundle, it looks like you're going to be charged the full price of the bundle, which I'm sure turns off a lot of people. So, bundles are a little bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah.
What I'm probably most intrigued about is the in-app swag, the merchandise that you just covered, Federico, because I think there is room for a lot of different kinds of apps. Maybe not an affiliate linking app, but but I could see, for instance, a podcast player. What if your podcast player had a little store in it, and the merchandise that was in the store was based on the shows that you have queued up in your podcast player, whether it's t-shirts or stickers or something like that. That could be kind of cool. So, it reminds me too it's a lot like what musicians have ended up doing, because it's harder and harder these days to make money as a musician on your actual music.
Mhm.
So what they do is they make it off of concerts, t-shirts, all sorts of other merchandise. And I think that, that's something that app developers should look at as another avenue to bring in a different stream of revenue.
Yeah. So I think between subscriptions that we covered 2 weeks ago, and of course the other models, which is the paid download and the freemium approach within our purchases, then if you consider tip jar and the sort of more emotional unlock the feature if you really love the app strategy, and the future maybe of in-app merchandise and maybe even bundles if Apple only cared a little more about that. There is some choice now for developers on the App Store. You're not limited to, well, it's either a free download with ads or a paid upfront model. You're not limited to those anymore. There's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of slightly different and also radically different models, such as subscriptions. And I'm really intrigued to see what Apple announces in just a few days at WWDC. Maybe we're going to see even more flexibility for developers, which means even more flexibility for users, because I think it is important to make sure that the apps we love stick around. And so, as a user and as someone who is really entrenched in the iOS ecosystem and someone who really loves a lot of the apps that he uses on a daily basis, I want to make sure that those developers can make a living. And so if they want to try something different, I'm all for it. And we'll see what happens after WWDC. But I think at this point, there's enough flexibility, and I would love to see even more companies, even more developers try something new to make sure they can stay on the App Store and make a living selling apps.
Okay, well, that's it for this week, folks. Thanks again to our sponsors, Sketch Party TV and HealthView. And thank you for listening. As always, you can find this week's show notes at appstories.net/episodes/7. And you can find Federico and me at macstories.net and on Twitter, where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHEES. Okay, talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.